Compare that now to February of 2025. You know, there was a good show that was on during the 1990s called A Different World. That is what's going on right now. We're living in a different world. 70% of Americans say Trump is doing what he promised to do.
Looks like 70% of Americans believe that Trump's administration is doing exactly what they said would do. That's crazy. Welcome to another edition of Spark the Conversation. This is your host, Mark the Spark, bringing you today's news. Well, it was a busy weekend. A lot of things hit the news this weekend nationally. We had President Trump making a few statements, doing some interviews, and yesterday was the Super Bowl between Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles smoked Kansas City Chiefs 40-22, but I don't even think that score really tells the whole story because for most of the game, the spread seemed much further than that. Philadelphia even had time to put its backups in to at least get a touch on the field during the game, which is pretty good indication of how the game actually went. There's only really one controversial call in the Chiefs' favor, so that really didn't play a factor. It was early in the game, and after that, it seemed like the refs kind of stood back and really didn't interfere too much. President Trump was at the game. He was the first sitting president to attend a Super Bowl, and he really didn't take a front stage for most of the game. There was a report that I read that he didn't stay for the whole thing or stay very long at all, but I only saw that in one article, so I'm not really sure how valid that is. But he was there for the beginning, and it was a pretty big piece of the national anthem. When they showed him, it was very clear how popular he was. And he also went down to the field before the game started, because there was a ceremony for the first responders who, for New Orleans, where they had that terrorist attack from the illegal immigrant that drove down the occupied street and took out a bunch of partygoers that were there at night. So they had a ceremony before the game, honoring the victims and the first responders for New Orleans, which was pretty nice. And Donald Trump went down, like I said, and shook their hands and thanked them for their service, which was good to see. Also, preceding the game, Donald Trump did a thing that wasn't done last year. It's a pretty regular thing for the president to do an interview, sit-down interview with one of the mainstream medias before the Super Bowl. Joe Biden did not do that last year. I think we all know why, because he really wouldn't have been able to answer any questions and probably would have asked where he was a few times. So Donald Trump sat down with Bret Baier and did some answering of the questions about a bunch of different topics. And he also was reported from Air Force One, signing a declaration on there as well, which we'll show that in a clip. But here is about a 5-minute clip of the interview with Bret Baier, which I think answers a lot of questions, shows Donald Trump's knowledge of what the world is, happening around him, and his views on some different topics.
Had some pushbacks. 19 states' attorneys general filed a lawsuit, and early Saturday, a judge agreed with them to restrict Elon Musk and his government efficiency team, DOGE, from accessing Treasury Department payment and data systems. They said there was a risk of irreparable harm. What do you make of that? And does that slow you down on what you want to do?
No, I disagree with it 100%. I think it's crazy. And we have to solve the efficiency problem. We have to solve the fraud, waste, abuse, all the things that have gone into the government. You take a look at the USAID, the kind of fraud in there,
and you
where
found
the money's
significant
going.
things.
Well, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of money that's going to places where it shouldn't be going, where if I read a list, you'd say this is ridiculous, and you've read the same lists, and there are many that you haven't even seen. It's crazy. It's a big scam. Now, there's some good money, and we can do that through any one of a number. I think I'd rather give it to Marco Rubio over at the State Department. Let him take care of the few good ones. So I don't know if it's kickbacks or what's going on, but the people, look, I ran on this, and the people want me to find it. And I've had a great help with Elon Musk, who's been terrific.
Bottom line, you say you trust him.
Trust Elon? Oh, he's not gaining anything. In fact, I wonder how he can devote the time to it. He's so into it. But I told him do that. Then I'm going to tell him very soon, like maybe in 24 hours, to go check the Department of Education. He's going to find the same thing. Then I'm going to go to the military. Let's check the military. We're going to find billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud and abuse. But I campaigned on this, Brett.
You announced tariffs on Canada and Mexico. You immediately got action from both of them on border security and drug interdiction.
I did. A lot of
action.
Is that good
enough?
Expected.
Is that good enough?
No, it's not good enough.
So more needed in 30 days.
Something has to happen. It's not sustainable. And I'm changing it.
You know, the Prime Minister said this weekend to a group of Canadian businessmen, he was at a private meeting, he said that your wish for Canada to be the 51st state is a, quote, real thing. Is it a real thing?
Yeah, it is. I think Canada would be much better off being a 51st state because we lose $200 billion a year with Canada, and I'm not going to let that happen. It's too much. Why are we paying $200 billion a year, essentially in subsidy to Canada? Now, if they're a 51st state, I don't mind doing it.
You said the tariff is a beautiful word. There are some signs in the markets, consumer confidence, that they're a little jittery. So if all goes to plan, when do you think families will be able to feel prices going down, groceries, energy, or are you kind of saying to them, hang on, inflation may get worse until it gets better?
No, I think we're going to become a rich... Look, we're not that rich right now. We owe $36 trillion. That's because we let all these nations take advantage of us. Same thing, like $200 billion with Canada. We owe $300. We have a deficit with Mexico of $350 billion. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to let that happen.
Sports has always been something that Americans rally around to come together. They really do. You won the popular vote. You won all the swing states. Have you thought about how to try to bring the country together, to reach out or to find common ground? Have you thought about that or how that might go?
I'd love to do it. But I would say this. We have to come together. But to come together, there's only one thing that's going to do it, and that's massive success. Success will bring the country together, but it's hard. And I say it's hard. I just signed a bill allowing for women not to have to be punished by men in sports. In other words, men are not going to be allowed to play in sports against women. It's ridiculous.
You're a sports guy. You're a football fan. Size up these two teams.
I'm a big fan of both teams. They're sort of different. In Philadelphia, you have one of the greatest running backs, Saquon. You know, Saquon had an uncle who was a great fighter, and Iran Barkley, his name was. So you have a great running back. You really have a great quarterback. The other team, the quarterback really knows how to win. He is a great, great quarterback.
So game prediction?
I hate to do it. I just say that I've watched this great quarterback who has, by the way, a phenomenal wife, okay? She's a Trump fan. She's a MAGA fan, so I happen to love her, okay? But she's a great person. I watched her being interviewed. I said, boy, that's pretty good. But she's great, and he's great. I guess you have to say that when a quarterback wins as much as he's won, I have to go with Kansas City. I have to go with Kansas City. At the same time, Philadelphia has a fantastic game. It's going to be just a great game.
Finally, listen, you are the most recognized person in the world, likely the most imitated person in the world. Every comedian has a Donald Trump imitation, everyone. But now you have UFC fighters winning fights, NFL players doing the Trump dance. Yeah. Did you ever think that was going to be a thing?
No, I didn't. I mean, we do these rallies. They've always been great, but they got really great. And it's just, I don't know what it is. I try and walk off sometimes without dancing, and I can't. I have to dance because it's just got something special about it.
Mr. President, thanks for the time.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the game.
So they cover DOGE, making Canada the 51st state, and some other important topics, along with talking a little bit about the Super Bowl that was upcoming. And President Trump, because he is not your standard politician who doesn't want to answer questions and beats around the bush, gives a prediction. Granted, he was wrong, but I think his analysis was valid. I probably would have given a similar analysis before the game, and my bets were actually on Kansas City as well. So it was a big surprise to see them fall flat on their face, and Mahomes quite literally fell flat on his face a few times, or was sacked anyways. So on the way to the Super Bowl, Donald Trump had the media on Air Force One with him because, as the transparent president he is signing a lot of declarations and executive orders in front of the media and allows them to ask him questions while he is doing whatever he's doing, his task, signing executive orders or just sitting at the desk. So he sits there and asks, or he's signing this declaration, now pronouncing the former Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America, as he's flying over the Gulf of America for the first time.
Air Force One is currently in international waters for the first time in history, flying over the recently renamed Gulf of America. Please enjoy the flight, and we are now about to head westbound to Super Bowl 59.
Wow, you did that well. That's a big... Make America great again, right? That's what we care about. Okay, here we go. So this is a famous pen now.
What a flex to change the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Classic Trump style. And not only that, he loves his pens. I don't know if he did this in his last term, but it seems like he's really gotten a fixation on the pens that he signs these executive orders and declarations with. And he usually either has them set aside for something or hands it to somebody who's there. There's also a clip going around. I'm not going to show it, but there is one pretty easy to find. If you look it up, the Huffington Post asked a question on Air Force One. And so Donald Trump says, "Who are you with?" He says, "Huff Post." He's like, "Huff Post? I thought they were dead." And he just goes on to the next question, which is just classic Donald Trump. So at the Super Bowl, Taylor Swift was, of course, there because Travis Kelce is her boyfriend. They're the famous couple, some of which has drawn some of her Swiftie fans to watching the NFL game, supposedly, or at least to buy Travis Kelce merch. But she was at the game, and she wasn't so popular. Now, the left is trying to spin this as Trump was the unpopular one, and Taylor Swift was the popular one. I don't know how they spin it. I'm going to show you the clips, one back to back, and you can see the reaction of the crowd. So they're in the middle of singing the national anthem, and it flips to showing Donald Trump on the Jumbotron, and the crowd goes nuts. I mean, it's pretty clear they're responding to them showing Donald Trump. And then at a later point, they show Taylor Swift, and you know what happened. There was a chorus of boos. Watch it. Rulers fight for the ramparts we watched. And you could see the look on her face when she realizes that she's not the popular one today. And then Trump, in classic Trumpian style, after the game, tweets out on X, and it was probably on Truth Social, retweeted on X, and he says, Travis Kelce wasn't the only one who had a rough game. Taylor Swift also had a rough game. Turned out she's not so popular. And he said something like, MAGA's not so forgiving. Basically, because she endorsed Kamala Harris and, didn't turn out so well for her. So, which is interesting because he also talks, Donald Trump talks about Mahomes' wife, Brittany Mahomes, who is a Trump supporter, and they're like best friends, Taylor Swift and Brittany Mahomes. So it's very interesting to see that, they get along so well. Clearly politics hasn't divided them. So I guess maybe Taylor Swift's not all bad if she can at least tolerate somebody who thinks differently than she does politically. But I still don't like her. But that's just my own personal prerogative. So Also, during the Super Bowl, there were a couple commercials. One was an NFL commercial. And even though, so there was some big controversy about the NFL removing end racism from the ends of the touchdowns, on the other side of the touchdowns, where it's been for 2-3 seasons now. And, even though they still did the Black national anthem, which isn't a thing, but that's what they claim, because there's only one national anthem, but they do this, whatever song they do, before the game. And they still did that, but they removed end racism. So now the left got in a tizzy because they said, oh, you just removed it for Donald Trump because he was going to be there and you didn't want to stand up and speak truth to power and all the, BS that they like to say. But they did have a few commercials that were still woke, because some of these corporations, they still don't understand that they're going to get hammered at some point if they keep this up. And this is not what the people want. In fact, if you haven't read the tea leaves yet, after the election was won in such a crushing landslide, I think, for Donald Trump to take the popular vote along with so many of the electors, the writing's on the wall. He received a mandate from the people to not do this kind of stuff, to end this kind of stuff. And he alluded to that in his interview with Brett Baer about getting boys out of girl sports, which literally is an 80-20 issue. And as we're going to see in a future clip, the left keeps taking the 20. They can't stop. Even with electing David Hogg as one of their co-chairs of the DNC. You're not getting it. You got to read. We're going to get into a little bit of statistics later, but they're not reading the data. They refuse to read the data. In fact, Brett Shapiro talks about facts don't care about your feelings all the time. And I heard from another person who was on a podcast with David Rubin the other day say that she thinks it's the opposite. Feelings don't care about your facts. Now, I actually think it's pretty good both ways. I think that both can be true. Both are true. That facts don't care about feelings because facts are facts, but also people with strong feelings don't care about facts because they can't be convinced of anything because they have such strong feelings. And that is true as well. And I don't think that they're exclusively true. I think that they're true together. Just different situations depending on the context. So anyways, back to these commercials. The first one I want to show you is a commercial from the NFL. It looks like maybe Nike collaborated on it because there is a Nike symbol on one of their headbands towards the end. But it was from the NFL trying to show that women, I guess what they're trying to pump up women, I guess is the point. I'm not really sure. They're trying to pump up women at the expense of men. That part is clear. Now, if you want to read into it to say that maybe women can do all the same things men can do, I think that they're trying to push that point a little bit. But I have one major question that I'll tell you after you watch this clip.
Settle this once and for all. Your best guy?
Girl.
Whatever. Versus our best guy. The Brad.
Oh, not the Brad. I'm Brad.
I can read.
There you go. You got folded up, Brad. Get her. Okay. That's what I'm talking about. Oh.
And so my one major question after watching that clip is, why aren't there any women playing NFL football? Why not? Bigots. Like, really, you just played that whole video about women beating men. And, they could have made this commercial without the expense of men and without degrading men and putting them down to say they're all Chads or they're all Brads, whatever. They picked some generic name with some jock. And they could have did that without that. The end clip shows the real game, which would be girls and girls, which is how it should be. It's fair that way. And nobody has to worry about getting crushed. But in the beginning, she evades not only the Brad, but the whole team, because then he says, get him. And then they go try to tackle her because they can't hold back. They got to try to go for a kill. And they all miss because she evades them all. Unlikely to happen. But in the end, Ben Shapiro actually pointed out this today, that the stands are full of people watching this. And he's saying this is imaginary because not that many people would go to watch women's flag football. That's probably true. Now, there are some like powder puff, I think is what they call them, football games, which is usually girls playing football for charity. I don't know. I think it's done at the high school levels, maybe just college levels. I'm not really sure. I've never really watched one, but he made the point that the stands would never be this full for flag football. I mean, they can't fill the stands for the WNBA. So what makes you think flag football is going to draw in that much? But regardless, my point is they could have made this commercial without degrading men. They could have just had the girls playing it against each other, and they could have, had some girl be successful against the other girls, but they couldn't do it. They had to do the whole misogyny thing, and men are, pretend tough, but women are real tough. The whole game. It just goes to prove that some of these people on the left, they can't stop. They have to continue this charade, and they have to continue going after the 20% when the 80% is smacking them in the face saying, we don't like this. So the next commercial is kind of similar. Basically, this one isn't necessarily degrading men, but it gives a false impression of what girls are told. Basically trying to tell us that women are always told, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that, but that they can and they will just because they're told they can't. I don't know. It's whatever. There's a third or fourth wave feminism message in there. Here's that clip from Nike.
You can't be demanding. You can't be relentless. You can't put yourself first. So, put yourself first. You can't be confident, so be confident. You can't challenge, so challenge. You can't dominate, so dominate. You can't flex, so flex. You can't fill a stadium, so fill that stadium. You can't be emotional, so be emotional. You can't take credit. You can't speak up. You can't be so ambitious. You can't break records. You can't have any fun. You can't make demands. You can't keep score. You can't stand out. Whatever you do, you can't win. So win.
So I think that might be like another truth to power message or something. They say you can't do it, so do it. Basically, I mean, if the message is to tell women that you can do what most things that men can do if you put your mind to it, or you can be successful at sports too, then fine. That's a good message. But if the message is you can outcompete men, or that men and the world are telling you that you can't do, I don't think that message is out there. I think that's a false impression of what the world is telling women. And for most women, they're not going to play at a professional level in sports. That's also true for most men. They're not going to play at a professional level in sports. And I think that a lot of men are told you're probably not going to make a living in professional sports as well, because most are not. And if they believe that they have good chances of doing it, then somebody's lying to them, because the chances are pretty small for both men and women. Now, the chances are smaller for women that they're going to make a living playing a sport, just because there are even less professional sports that pay a living wage for women. And that just as a result of less people watching those kind of sports. You know, I think that eventually you're going to see women's soccer completely fold because of the agreement that they made to get paid the same as men, even though they're bringing in way less viewership. And that deal might have already been renegotiated, but if it hasn't, it will be soon enough. So you're going to see a continuation of this message from Nike, and eventually the message from their customer base is going to hit home, and they're going to see it in the dollars and cents. Now, when we talk about the economy in our next topic, and we're going to get into talking about DOGE and the cuts that they're making, the cuts that Trump is making to the federal government, you're going to see that they're going to try to throw race into it, because they have to throw race into everything. So just like the NFL does, the mainstream media is still in the left, the lamestream media, I should say, and the left-leaning media, which is most of the lamestream media, is going to continue this message. Now the message is saying that cutting the price, or cutting taxes and cutting expenses of the federal government is racist.
The federal workforce is the largest employer in the nation, and federal data shows that Black Americans, who have historically found greater equity in the public sector compared to the private sector, will disproportionately bear the brunt of Trump's effort to gut the federal workforce. Black people are more likely to be employed by state or federal government than any other demographic. According to a Center for American Progress analysis of 2022 data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, approximately 1 in 5 Black workers are employed in the public sector.
So you could see that DEI is alive and well in public sector hiring practices, which is really nothing new. We knew that all along, but it's just another statistic that they've thrown at us to tell us that, you know, any kind of cuts at the federal level are racist. Now, I would bet if you go and check with the Black community and ask them if they want to pay more or less taxes, I would guess that they would probably say that they want to pay less taxes. And like even the people who pay no taxes would say they want to pay less taxes. And they support a lot of the cuts that are being made at the federal level. In fact, most of the cuts of positions at the federal level have been voluntary so far. People are taking buyouts in order to voluntarily leave or not to return to the office. I would bet also, if you broke down the things that are being cut right now, especially a lot of this stuff out of the slush fund that we call the USAID, they would be in support of cutting those things, because those are not things that benefit them. Those is more foreign aid, but it's also slush fund. Now, Representative Jasmine Crockett, the newest race baiter in Congress, who is not an eloquent speaker, to put it nicely, is also calling out the race card. And she is trying to say that Black people, brown people, people of color, as they like to say, are going to be rounded up now because of Trump's policies. Here's that.
I do believe that fear is truly warranted in the sense that people of color are just going to be rounded up. I mean, we've lived it, especially as Black folk in this country, right? Like, it's the racial profiling. And so whether you're a U.S. citizen, whether you are here as a DACA recipient, whether you are undocumented, whether you are naturalized, whatever your situation is, I think that if you can be mistaken for being a brown person, that you should be concerned, because there is nothing that is tatted on anybody's head that says I'm undocumented or I'm a citizen, right?
So it's kind of funny that they want to point out the effects on race, and they also want to point out some of these powers. Supposedly, Donald Trump came up with a bunch of new powers. He's given Elon Musk a bunch of powers. We've already talked about, their Elon derangement syndrome and their Trump derangement syndrome, right? And we'll get to some of the backing behind some of this policy in a minute. But I just want to show you the craziness of some of these leftist politicians who are trying to just drum up fear about the cuts that are being made at the federal level. And again, I said it before, I'm going to keep saying it. They are so out of touch. They cannot stop. They cannot stop taking the 20% of the issue. It's like in betting. Like if you got a betting problem, right? And you're betting on the low end, you're betting on the slow horse, hoping to get a big payday. Except there's no payday coming. They keep betting on the slow horse, knowing that the slow horse is losing. If you look at any kind of data, the slow horse is not going to win in this race, but they keep betting on the slow horse. It's just ironic and quite enjoyable, actually, on this side of the fence. Here's Ilhan Omar, another race baiter from the squad, what's remaining of the squad anyways, because they seem to be suffering lately. But she's saying that there's a constitutional crisis because of DOGE.
And what we are witnessing is a constitutional crisis. We are seeing an executive branch that has decided that they are no longer going to abide by the Constitution in honoring Congress's role in the creation of the agencies, in their role in deciding where money is allocated. Yeah.
It's funny because in the last 4 years, they didn't seem to have any issues with Biden overstepping his power. They had no problems with him expanding the size of the federal government. And so here's another one. This is Attorney General of Connecticut talking about how he is going to sue the Trump administration over the cuts that DOGE is making.
It's announced that Connecticut and our sister states have sued President Trump, Treasury Secretary Besson, and the federal government for DOGE and letting Elon Musk and his tech bros into the U.S. Treasury system. This is utterly unconstitutional, unlawful. It represents the biggest data breach in American history, and we're fighting back.
And we have another one. Senator Andy Kim is planning on, or at least willing to, shut down the government in order to try to stop DOGE. So he won't come out and say it directly because he doesn't have the guts, but it's clear that he's willing to stand up. And then at one point he says, I worked in the government. Yeah, we know, we can tell because of your ineffectiveness and inefficiency. It's clear you've worked in the government. Here's him on shutting the government down.
Because your colleague Jeff Merkley basically said he's prepared to try to shut down the government over some of these sledgehammer actions that he's seeing by Elon Musk. Are you prepared to shut down the government, to join Democratic colleagues who want to stand in the way of keeping the government open?
Well, you have to look at what the Trump administration is doing right now. They are simply trying to dismantle the government. So yes, look, if we have to take steps to be able to hold them accountable, use the leverage that we have to force it, I cannot support efforts that will continue this lawlessness that we're seeing when it comes to this administration's actions. And for us to be able to support government funding in that way, only for them to turn it around to dismantle the government, that is not something that should be allowed.
So just to be clear, Senator, you are open to voting yes to shut down the government, to make this point.
This is on them. This is about whether or not they can get the votes. They are the majority, and if they cannot govern, then that's for the American people to see. But I've worked in government. I've worked through multiple government shutdowns. I would be the last person to want to get to that stage. But we are at a point where we are basically on the cusp of a constitutional crisis, seeing this administration taking steps that are so clearly illegal. And until we see a change in that behavior, we should not allow and condone that, nor should we assist in that.
You know, it's funny. He talks about the danger of the Trump administration not only trying to make cuts, but try to dismantle the government. It's again, he's not reading the writing on the wall. The American people are not concerned about the dismantling of the federal government. They are not. This is what Trump was elected to do. He was elected to dismantle. He was elected to disrupt and change. We need drastic changes. We're $37 trillion in debt with a massive $1 to $2 trillion deficit every year. And don't get me wrong, Trump, I believe, spent way too much in the last administration. When he was in office, he spent too much money. But this is a different Trump administration. He was brought in under a different mandate this time. I think that, I was saying, well, we'll get into it a little bit when we talk about his approval numbers. So maybe I'll say it again, but I think the last 4 years of Joe Biden was the inoculation of the American people to TDS. Trump derangement syndrome has been inoculated in quite a large sum of the American public that wouldn't even talk about him before, has now have an open mind to a lot of these changes because they've seen the failure and destruction of the Democratic Party when they're left unabated. So, they're going to keep going. Now we've got another one. Elizabeth Warren complaining that the prices of groceries haven't come down yet.
Super Bowl Sunday. And here's a reminder that Donald Trump has done pretty much nothing to lower your grocery costs. Remember, during Donald Trump's campaign, he repeatedly promised to lower food prices immediately. He said on day one. But here we are, way past day one, and the cost of groceries has only gone up. Chicken wings cost over 7% more than they did a year ago. Egg prices have risen 60%. From $2.51 a dozen to over $4 a dozen. Look, instead of lowering costs for your family, Trump's been focused on cutting funding for hot meals for seniors and giving Elon Musk access to the system that makes sure that your grandparents get their Social Security checks on time. Donald Trump needs to buckle down and use the tools he has to lower grocery prices and deliver on his promises.
Isn't it funny that now they want to talk about grocery prices? Now they're concerned about reducing the price of living for the American public. All of a sudden, we couldn't talk about this for 4 years. We were not allowed to talk about it when we had massive inflation. They kept spending money. They kept printing money by the trillions. Okay, inflating the economy, creating a false boom in the stock market, basically setting us up for a massive crash or at least stagflation, which we did have. We had a recession, whether they want to admit it or not. We might have had two by the old definition, and they didn't want to talk about prices at all. Now, all of a sudden, it's a problem that they want fixed day one. And Trump did sign an executive order on day one telling all the government departments to do what they could and look into different strategies that they could make and take to lower the prices of groceries and other products and lower the cost of living for the American people. That's one of the ideas behind these tariffs, not only to bring business back to the United States, which helps the workers, but also to renegotiate the deals that we have with other countries, which does ultimately lower the prices for the United States. We're going to use our purchasing power, which we have not used before. Donald Trump, as the master of negotiations that he is going to use the power of the American economy to make better deals and lower prices for Americans. That is what he is doing. And all the left wants to do is spread fear and try to tell you that he's not being successful. American people aren't buying it. And you can see the American people aren't buying it in these numbers. The numbers don't lie. The people want this kind of They want this kind of efficiency in the government. They know that things need to change. One example is the removal of the penny. The penny costs almost 3 cents to make each penny. And for what? Do we really need a penny? How many people are using pennies anymore? I mean, I try to use cash from time to time, but I can't tell you the last time I used a penny. In fact, I would like to get rid of change altogether. I hate when I have to use. That's the one worst part about using cash is that I know I'm probably going to end up with coins in my pocket. So here's a clip talking about the removal of the penny.
Latest in what we've seen has been a rapid fire effort by the Trump administration to try and find areas to cut funding, to cut money. And this is one that the president now says he argues is one that he wants to target. Now, this was not, I want to note, not something that the president talked about throughout his time on the campaign trail. But we do know that Elon Musk, who's running, the Department of Government Efficiency, they had actually brought this up last month in a post on X highlighting the cost to produce pennies. So all of this kind of tied to that broader effort of them trying to find waste, abuse, and fraud in the government. And now the president is saying this is one area that he wants to move forward with. John.
And as I said, the American public has realized that these changes need to be made, and they are quite happy with the changes that are being made so far. And now Trump, as being the 80-20 president, picking the 80, not the crazy left who's trying to pick the 20, Donald Trump is basically the personified version of promises made, promises kept. I mean, we could basically put that on repeat because everything he's done up to this point has been a promise that he made during his campaign. And since he campaigned on it, the election is a mandate to do those things. And so he's just following through. And it's amazing because it's almost like we're in the Twilight Zone, because when was the last time you had a politician who actually did what they said they were going to do? I mean, it seems pretty simple, right? You make a bunch of promises in your campaign, you get elected, which means people liked those promises, generally speaking, and now you do the things you promised. Seems pretty simple to me. Apparently not. But that's what Donald Trump's doing, and these are the numbers to tell you that people like it.
I think one of the things that's so important for politicians is for folks to believe what they're saying and that they're keeping their campaign promises. So I think this gives you a pretty gosh darn good idea of what may be going on. Trump's doing what he promised to do. You go back to April of 2017, it was just 46% of all Americans who said that Trump was doing what he promised to do. Compare that now to February of 2025. There was a good show that was on during the 1990s called A Different World. That is what's going on right now. We're living in a different world. 70% of Americans say Trump is doing what he promised to do. Again, compare that to April of 2017 when it's just 46%. When Americans are 24 points more likely to say that you're doing what you promised to do, it's no wonder that your net approval rating is much more likely to be on the positive side of the ledger than on the negative side. And so far, what we're seeing, again, is Americans, 21 days so far, versus just 11 days during his entire first term, that Trump has a positive net approval rating. Quite a different world.
Quite a different world. And this is reporting from CNN. It's almost, again, Twilight Zone, because it's so obvious. It's a CBS poll. It's so obvious it's smacking them in the face. Even CNN has to report it. Here's another panel talking about the popularity. So that was talking about the numbers of people who just thought that Trump was doing what he promised to do. So there's a lot of people in that poll, obviously, that may not agree with the things that Trump is doing, or maybe how he's doing them. But this is now talking about a poll of how popular Donald Trump is.
Like the 80-20 president. He gets on the right side of all these 80-20 issues. Democrats knee jerk and take the 20. And then what happens? Today, CBS News poll this morning, Donald Trump sitting at a 53% approval rating, the highest he's ever recorded in that survey. Why? Because Democrats are taking the wrong side of all of these obvious issues, number one. And number two, they're giving him an enormous amount of latitude to move fast and break things, which I heard used in a pejorative fashion. But when you're talking about the government, that's what people want.
Well, and Democrats keep
Trump to do.
So 53% popularity rating, which is the highest rating that Trump has ever had. Now, we always talked about this is where we get back to talking about the numbers, where we've always talked about a ceiling for Donald Trump, where he had a pretty high floor, right? Because he's got a base that would never leave him. And this was always true ever since he came down the golden escalator. But he's also got a pretty low ceiling, where it is, we talked about how many people that would never vote for him, right? The most amount of support that he could get, which is why we thought he could never win the popular vote. But he did. And now the numbers are going higher than they've ever been. So now we're seeing that maybe the ceiling is higher than we expected. And that's why I say, and I'll say it again, and I just came up with this today. This is original. Imagine that. I got an original thought. No, I said that Joe Biden and the Biden-Harris administration was the inoculation to Trump derangement syndrome. Because some of those people who would have never considered voting for Trump, who would have never even talked about supporting Trump, are now all of a sudden supporters. Because, and that's can only be true when we see the popularity numbers are higher than they've ever been. So he's 6 points out of the water, and he is getting support from people we never thought he would. And that's why I say that some of these people have been inoculated. Now, although we hate that, but this inoculation is not from Pfizer, so it's okay. He's been inoculated, or these people have been inoculated from TDS, and now have come to realize that what he's doing is actually good for the country. And they're willing to consider that maybe those promises that he made are actually going to benefit them, and that they're going to start to see these benefits. So it's good news. Some of these positive things that are coming out of this is out of Ukraine. I think we're going to start seeing more and more a certain amount of war fatigue in Ukraine. You really have seen a lot of like a dying off of the discussion of the things that are happening in Ukraine. You've definitely seen a reduction in the amount of money flowing out of our pockets to Ukraine with no end in sight, which I think Donald Trump is going to quickly tire from. And also now when you get reports of the inefficiency and I would say fraud, waste, and abuse of the money that's going to Ukraine is going to be similar to what you found in the USAID. And even President Zelensky from Ukraine, it says there's like $100 billion of aid that went to Ukraine missing. Now, it'll be interesting to see how that is found out, because it's not like we were just handing over cash. Most of the money that was allocated to Ukraine was actually like us giving them weapons directly, not just handing cash over. So it'll be interesting to see how that's actually laid out on paper. But he says that $100 billion is missing. And he even alludes to the fact that the Democratic Party might have pocketed some of it. Now, we always thought that maybe Ukraine war was a big money laundering scheme for the Democratic Party, and it quite possibly still is, or was. Hopefully there's an investigation launched into this $100 billion, but also more, all the money that was given over there and supplies that were allocated for Ukraine, to see where all that money went. Here's a clip, and I'll narrate it for you because it's actually in another language. So if you're just listening to this podcast, you will not know what he's saying. I hear, and I heard before, and today we hear from the United States of America.
Сьогодні ми чуємо від Сполучених Штатів Америки, що Америка
That America gave Ukraine hundreds of billions, 177 to be more precise.
Якщо сказати більш точно, така звучала
That's
точно.
what the exact figure sounded like,
В Конгрес, то
which was supported or voted on by Congress. Look, as the president of a warring country, I tell you,
ми
we
отримали
received just over 75.
більше 75. Тобто
That is 100 billion of these 177 or 200. Some people even say we never received.
І це важливо.
And that's important
Ми говоримо про
because we're talking about specific things.
бо ми отримали це
Because we got it not with the money, but with weapons. We got 70-something billion worth of it. There's training, there's additional transport. There are not only prices for weapons.
Навчання, тренування, є додатковий транспорт, є не тільки ціну на зброю, були
There
гуманітарні.
were humanitarian programs, social, etc. But when they say that Ukraine during the war received $200 billion to support the army, etc.,
армії, тощо, це неправда.
this is not true.
Знаю,
I
де
don't know where all this money is. And so again, this is going to grow old to the American people, the taxpayer, especially when we're talking about how much waste there is right now. I mean, this is something that the American public has always just assumed. And since we realized that it was very unlikely that it was going to come to light where all this money was being wasted on and where all the fraud was and where all the abuse was, we kind of knew we couldn't do anything about it. And our hands were tied. And so we kind of just accepted reality. Like, these things are never going to get fixed. There's not much we can do about it. We're not going to like storm the Capitol. We're not going to, have a coup. We're not going to take over the White House or anything like that. And even if you did, it wouldn't make a difference. So you accepted it as reality. You knew that taxation was coming. Taxation is theft. You knew that they were coming for your money. People with guns, that's why I always say taxation is theft. Whether you argue the necessity for taxes or not, that's a different story. But I say taxation is theft because whenever somebody comes for you with guns and forces you to give them something, what do we call that? It's theft. They're taking your stuff by force. So it's pretty clear that the American public is now that we have the feeling that something could change, that there's a change in the wind, that there's a chance that the truth will come out, we're going to support it. And so when the left tries to fearmonger by saying, oh, they're going to shut down Department of Education, they're going to minimize the IRS, they're going to go after the FBI, we say, go for it. Yeah, we're cheering because that's what we want. That's exactly what we want. And the left can say, how dare you, however much they want. But we're not buying it. We've had enough. So I think the Ukraine thing is going to come to an end very soon, whether it costs Ukraine some land or not. We've given them quite a bit. And now there's going to be another popular item that Trump's talking about. He's talking about getting repayment for some of this cost that the American people have put up for the Ukraine war. And why not? I've said it before. Why are we handing over this money for free? For all of these wars that we fight for other countries, especially when it's a country that we're fighting for instead of just a people like we did in the Middle East. We weren't necessarily defending a country. We were going after a country. That was our prerogative. This case is different where we're helping defend a country with an economy and with a quite large amount of people. And also quite a large amount of resources. So Trump says, you know what? We gave you all this money. We want payment in return, and we'll take it in the, minerals and rare earth metals that you guys have.
We're telling Ukraine they have very valuable rare earth. We want what we put up to go in terms of a guarantee. We want a guarantee. We're handing them money hand over fist. We're giving them equipment. European is not keeping up with us. They should equalize. And look, we have an ocean in between. They don't. It's more important for them than it is for us. But they're way below us in terms of money. And they should be paying at least equal. They should really be paying much more than us. But let's say equal to us. And they're billions and billions of dollars below. So we're looking to do a deal with Ukraine where they're going to secure what we're giving them with their rare earth and other things.
So the timing is right. And I think that you're going to see that this also has wide popular support. Although this was not necessarily a thing that Trump campaigned on, he did campaign on ending the Ukraine war. And I think that ending it will be a part of this puzzle. and will also make what he's talking about here, the repayment part, more popular. So, and I think also the discussion with DOGE is making this more popular. And so I wanted to talk about one other piece, which I didn't talk about before with DOGE, is the legality of this department. And this is something that I didn't realize until today when I read this on X. And I actually found this on the White House webpage. So this isn't just a conspiracy, that DOGE was actually an institution of the government created by Obama, which is classic, right? This is Kids in Cages 2.0, where they're going to go after something that Trump's doing, but he really just used something that Obama created. And so this is called Establishing and Implementing the President's Department of Government Efficiency, Executive Order, written on January 20th, 2025. So this is the first day he was inaugurated. And under Section 3, letter A, it says the DOGE structure, reorganizing and renaming the United States Digital Service. So the USDS was already in existence. This is something that Obama established. And he says the USDS is hereby publicly renamed as the United States DOGE Service and shall be established in the executive office of the president. So it's under the executive orders of the president, the executive power. And it was created under an already existing structure of an institution. And this goes on and on. It lays out the whole thing, the functions and the different parts of this executive order, like they all do. But it was created by Obama. That's like so classic that, again, they get rid of all the rules. This is a man of all seasons quote that I quote all the time. I always think about this because the left loves to destroy they love to destroy all the pieces of the government that are protecting different aspects, right? They want to get rid of the filibuster. They've gotten rid of the filibuster for a lot of different things. They love to destroy things, right? And then when the devil comes for them, so they destroy it in search of their devil, whichever they're calling their devil today. And then when the devil comes for them, they have nothing to stand on. They have nothing to protect them. I mean, it's so classic. This is classic Man for All Seasons. It was Sir Thomas More. That's a great quote that I think of all the time because it describes the left to a T. But anyways, that is the structure of DOGE, where it comes from. And basically Obama created DOGE, and now it's just coming to bite the left like all their policies do. And I also want to just mention Israel real quick. It sounds like Donald Trump's mentioned Israel a couple times in press conferences, saying that basically the Hamas are moving too slowly in giving up prisoners and that he's growing tired of it. And this evening, he made another statement alluding to the fact that it's moving too slow and that they need to pick up the pace. I think, the Hamas, they did release a couple more today, I believe. They've also claimed that Israel has broken the ceasefire agreement, which is highly doubtful. But Trump's pretty much had enough. I know I've had enough. I want this thing done with. Gaza is leveled. He can turn it into whatever he wants. Some kind of, vacation spot would be nice. Mar-a-Lago 2.0 per se. A lot of sunset facing beachfront there. Prime real estate. And break all these people up so that they can't come together and create the problems that they've been creating. Trump's growing tired of it. I think the American people are backing him on this. They're growing tired of it. And enough's enough. It's time to just get it over with and deal with it. And especially now that some of these hostages have come out and these guys are looking terrible. Trump actually said today, it looks like people from the Holocaust because they're just so malnourished. Actually, one of the guys who was released today, he made a statement right as soon as he was being released saying that he was looking forward to seeing his family, his wife and his kids. And he didn't know that they had been killed by the Hamas on October 7th, which is just to go through all that thinking that's your one, I'm sure knowing, a man who has a family your one principle, your one thing giving you the energy to survive going through this traumatic, terrible situation is that you're going to see your wife and kids again. And then you get out, finally get through it, and you find that they were killed, murdered in cold blood. It's just terrible. It's just terrible. And so we've had enough. Trump's had enough. And I think that you're going to see a lot of pressure poured on the Hamas now to end this one way or another. Anyways, that's all we have to cover for today. I appreciate you joining in. Please like, subscribe, follow if you can. If you've been listening regularly, I appreciate it. Leave a comment down below if you have any tips or tricks for improvement, or just a compliment is always nice. A good stroke of the ego is never a bad thing. But I appreciate you joining in today. Hope you come back tomorrow for another episode of Spark the Conversation. And don't forget to go out and volunteer for something meaningful. And as always, spark the conversation.